Hello everybody. Today in our series of applied neuroanatomy, we are going to discuss the anatomy of the extrapyramidal system. The extrapyramidal system is one of the two major descending pathways from the motor cortex, from the motor cerebral cortex. We have one system which is very well known and very well understood, the pyramidal system, going to the lower motor neurons, and which are the motor nuclei of the cranial nerves and the anterior horn cells of the spinal cord, then to the peripheral nerves and striated muscles. Also, there is another motor descending system, which is the extrapyramidal system, from the premotor cortex, from the supplementary motor cortex, area 6, in front of the precentral gyrus, going to brainstem and deep brain centers, also reaching lower motor neuron in the brainstem and spinal cord, peripheral nerves, and striated muscles. The definition of the extrapyramidal system, this word was coined by the British neurologist Kenya Wilson, who said that the basal ganglia and the brainstem nuclei contain a descending motor system outside the pyramidal tract, and he called this system the extrapyramidal system. And these include deep nuclei in the brain, like the lentiform nucleus, putamen globus pallidus, the caudate nucleus, and some scattered nuclei in the brainstem, like the vestibular nuclei, the red nucleus, the substantia nigra, and the superior colliculus, as we will see now. Where is the extrapyramidal center? Where is the center of the extrapyramidal system? The center is scattered nuclei in the brainstem and the brain. That's why sometimes it's difficult to say where is exactly the extrapyramidal system. It's a motor descending system outside the pyramid, so it's present in many places. Inferior olive, the red nucleus, the substantia nigra, the reticular formation of the brainstem, the lentiform and caudate nuclei, the subthalamic nucleus, all are components of the extrapyramidal system. And here is the basal ganglia, showing the caudate and putamen, which we'll see now they are one nucleus, the globus pallidus externus, globus pallidus internus, the subthalamic nucleus, substantia nigra. And we call sometimes the corpus striatum, the basal ganglia, with or without the internal capsule. Internal capsule is not a part of the extrapyramidal system, but it's a part of the corpus striatum. So sometimes there is overlapping between nomenclatures. And as I said, the associated structures, as we said, part substantia nigra, subthalamic nucleus, part of the thalamus, namely the lateral and anterior ventral nuclei of the thalamus, the red nucleus, reticular formation, and the cerebellum also is a part of the extrapyramidal system. Components of the extrapyramidal system: the basal ganglia, the midbrain, giving the following bulbospinal tracts: the rubrospinal tract, the vestibulospinal, reticulospinal, tectospinal, olivospinal. What is the function of the extrapyramidal system? It has a very, very important function. It is a discrete function that we all might forget about it or don't consider it too much, but without it we cannot perform, we cannot live, we cannot survive. The function is the muscle tone and the posture. So remember, if you get severe hypotonia from cerebellar affection, for instance, you are not able to lift objects. You are not able to perform the motor function properly. And if you get a hypertonia, like spasticity or rigidity, also you are not able to perform proper motor function, and you are as if you are impacted or you are imprisoned in your own body. The posture is very important. Every motor performance you are doing in life needs a certain posture to do it. For instance, some of the duties you have to do, the motor system, are done while you are sitting, others while you are bending, others while you are standing, and you totally forget about the posture you are taking, but without taking the proper posture, you are unable to do your motor performance properly. The muscle tone is through facilitatory and inhibitory upper motor control. The posture is through the neck and trunk muscles, the dorsal primary rami, reaching the muscles of the back, the big muscles, the multifidus, the trapezius, the latissimus dorsi, and many other important back muscles. These are responsible for the different postures you are taking, like extending your spine or bending on one side. And we are now going to discuss the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia, the caudate nucleus, which is the lateral boundary of the frontal horn of the lateral ventricle, and then the lentiform nucleus, which is formed like a lens, with an outer part, the putamen, and an inner part, the globus pallidus. And in between there is the internal capsule, between the lentiform and the thalamus, the lentiform and the caudate. This is another coronal view, showing here, as I told you, that the caudate nucleus, it blends, becomes one nucleus with the putamen. So actually, anteriorly, the caudate nucleus and putamen are fused together. The caudate nucleus and the putamen have the same function. The caudate nucleus and the putamen are a part of the extrapyramidal system. And this is a lateral view showing the caudate nucleus, the head of the caudate blending with the putamen, and it is arising from the amygdala down to the putamen. Another view, coronal cut, you all know about it. This is the putamen, this is globus pallidus externus, globus pallidus internus, internal capsule, the thalamus, and the substantia nigra, and the subthalamic nucleus. Again, showing you caudate coming from the amygdaloid, ending in the putamen. Another view, look here. When you see this view, they become one nucleus, the head of the caudate and the putamen. So they are considered as one functioning unit, having a head blending together, putamen and head of the caudate. The caudate has a tail coming from the amygdala, and deep to it is the globus pallidus externus and the globus pallidus internus. The basal ganglia pathways and circuits, you'll see it several times. You'll find it's very easy to remember, to catch. The circuit starts from the premotor area, from the supplementary motor area, from motor area 6, in front of the precentral gyrus, front of the pyramidal area 4. Then the impulses pass from this area to the caudate and putamen, which are considered as one nucleus, and from the caudate and the putamen, they go to the globus pallidus externus, and the globus pallidus externus is the external part of the globus pallidus, and it sends impulses external to the circuit. It sends it to the subthalamic nucleus and then to the substantia nigra present in the midbrain. So the globus pallidus externus receives from caudate and putamen and sends externally to the subthalamic nucleus, externally outside the circuit, and then to the substantia nigra, and then to the brainstem. The quotate and putamen give also the globus pallidus internus, which is internal part of the globus pallidus, and it continues the internal circuit, going to the thalamus, and we'll see which part of the thalamus, the lateral part and anterior part of the thalamus. And this is very important because the treatment of Parkinsonism, you can do your lesion in this part of the thalamus, or you can do it in the globus pallidus internus. And then from the thalamus, impulses go back to the premotor area. We'll see it in another drawing. Cortex, putamen and globus pallidus, caudate and putamen, globus pallidus externus, subthalamus. Caudate and putamen, globus pallidus internus, anterior and lateral ventral nuclei of the thalamus, then to the cerebral cortex. Also another view. And this is the real anatomy, the primary motor cortex, in front of it, the supplementary motor area. The supplementary motor area give impulses to the putamen and the caudate. Putamen caudate, globus pallidus externus, globus pallidus externus, where the fibers go to the substantia nigra and subthalamic nucleus. And the putamen and caudate give the globus pallidus internus. They continue the circuit, anterior ventral nucleus, lateral ventral nucleus of thalamus, premotor cortex. Cerebral cortex, caudate, putamen again, globus pallidus externus, going to the outside, subthalamic nucleus. Caudate and putamen, globus pallidus internus, internal circuit, to the thalamus, and from the thalamus to the cerebral cortex, and back to caudate and putamen. And this is how the fibers pass from the globus pallidus internus to continue to the thalamus, either by doing a loop around the internal capsule, we call the ansa lenticularis, or by fibers crossing through the internal capsule, called fasciculus lenticularis. As we said, the globus pallidus internus reaches the thalamus, the lateral ventral nucleus and anterior ventral nucleus of the thalamus through the two pathways, the ansa lenticularis and the fasciculus lenticularis. And many of the lesions we do for abnormal motions like chorea, like dystonia, like extrapyramidal movements. You can do the lesion in the globus pallidus internus. This is a very important target, or you can do it in the lateral or anterior nuclei, ventral nuclei of the thalamus. Another coronal cut showing again putamen, globus pallidus externus, internus, and the internal capsule. So caudate, putamen 1 unit, globus pallidus externus is 1 unit, globus pallidus internus is 1 unit. Another view, and another view, you can name it, put the names. And other parts of the extrapyramidal system, I'm going to talk about the nucleus accumbens because this is a relatively recent nucleus. Nucleus accumbens has a shell and a core and is considered a part of the basal ganglia, called the nucleus accumbens septi because it is present near the septum, as we'll see now, rostral to the hypothalamus, rostral to the preoptic nucleus of the hypothalamus. This is the MRI view, where is the nucleus accumbens, and this is the coronal, where it is existing. And here is a view, lateral view. You see here the pituitary stalk, hypothalamus, above the preoptic nucleus of the hypothalamus, and at the septal region of the septal nuclei, which is present anterior part of the septum pellucidum, which is extending between the corpus callosum and the fornix, the most anterior part. Behind the rostrum of the corpus callosum lies the nucleus accumbens. Shouldn't know all the connections. It has some connection with amygdala, hippocampus, prefrontal cortex, and sending output to the thalamus and the frontal cortex again. And it has dopamine pathways and serotonin pathways, nucleus accumbens. The functions of the dopamine pathways: reward, pleasure, euphoria, compulsion. And the functions of the serotonin pathways is the mood, the memory, processing, sleep, cognition. It's a very complex function. It is the center of pleasure, maternity, fine-tuning of the motor function. That's why it is part of the extrapyramidal system. Music, enjoyment, reward, compulsion, and perseverance. Stimulation, this is important because lesions in this region can treat depression, and ablation might treat addiction. Other parts of the extrapyramidal system, the red nucleus. We all know the red nucleus is present in the midbrain, and it decussates. The fibers decussate the cerebrospinal tracts. It decussates at the level of the red nucleus, going to the other side, passing through the pons and medulla, occupying the lateral column of the spinal cord, and ending in the anterior horn cells. Functions: it is integrated in the cerebral cortex, cerebellar processing. You remember the dentato, rubro, thalamo, frontopontocerebellar pathway. So this is the rubro. Its motor function is similar to corticospinal tract in distal control of the muscles. This is the rubrospinal tract crossing in the midbrain and going to the other side to the spinal cord. Also, it is involved in the pathway of connection between the cerebellum and the pyramidal tract, the cerebral cortex. This is another view showing the dentato, rubro, also thalamus, thalamo, and then from the thalamus, what we call the anterior ventral nucleus of the thalamus to the cerebral cortex. Another part, another scattered nucleus for the extrapyramidal is the reticulospinal tract. It is a medial and lateral. You should not remember every detail, but you should know that the reticular formation is forming the central core, most of the brain stem centrally, and contains many different nuclear groups. We have pontine nuclei, pontine reticular nuclei, and medullary reticular nuclei, functions influencing the motor function, voluntary movement, and reflexes, and responsible for the muscle tone. It is divided into medial and lateral, as we said, reticulospinal tracts. The medial is responsible for the exciting impulses to the anti-gravity muscles. The lateral is for inhibition of the anti-gravity muscles. This is a view you can see of the reticulospinal tracts, medial and lateral, the pontine reticulospinal tract. Mostly inhibited by the corticospinal tract. If damage occurs in the brainstem at the level of the superior colliculus, at the level of the red nucleus or below it, what do we get? We injure the reticulospinal tracts, and this will result in the decerebrate posture. When you have a severe head injury, severe brainstem injury, at the level of the red nucleus or below, you get this picture. When you give a painful stimulus, you get extension of the arms, you get pronation of both arms, you get flexion of the wrists, you get extension of the legs, and plantar flexion of the feet. This is posture related to injury to the medial and lateral reticulospinal tracts. The vestibular tracts, also you know that there are the vestibular nuclei, vestibular area, and then the vestibular apparatus, as you know, the vestibular nuclei. They go from the cerebellum, there is also connection with the cerebellum, go to the spinal motor neurons, and their function is the posture. So you have to know when you have information from the vestibular nerve, it goes to the vestibular apparatus, it goes to the cerebellum, and then it goes to be integrated and sending impulses through the vestibulospinal tracts to control the posture and to control the muscle, control the eye movements in relation to the semicircular canals and the utricle and the saccule, in relation to the vestibular receptors. So the information gets to the vestibular nuclei, and the vestibular nuclei regulates the posture through the vestibulospinal tracts. We have the medial vestibulospinal tract and the lateral vestibulospinal tract. Don't go through details. And also a very important part of the extrapyramidal system is the inferior olive. The superior olive is not involved in this, it is involved in hearing. But the olivospinal tract, as you took before, or we said it before in the cerebellum, the olivospinal fibers pass from the inferior olive and goes to the cerebellum, and the inferior olive has also control on the upper limbs, olivospinal tract. So it is present in the cervical region, it is not present after that. The function is unknown. This is the olive, pyramid here, the olive, and the olivospinal fibers to the cerebellum. Some say that the inferior olive is responsible for the posture you are taking during hunting. Hunting is no more important nowadays or in the recent age, but in the old days, this was the only way to survive. So it is responsible for taking the posture of hunting, especially in the upper limbs. And here is just to remind you that the inferior olive, through the inferior cerebellar peduncle, the restiform body, gives impulses to the Purkinje fibers, Purkinje cells on the surface of the cerebellum. And you all know the cerebellar pathways we talked about before. Thank you very much, and this will end our knowledge, or what we have to know as students or as neurosurgeons or as neurologists concerning the extrapyramidal system. Thank you very much, and we hope you can meet back soon.